2026 is a major election year, and midterms are just less than 3 months away. But how do you figure out who you're voting for? What are the issues and policy positions that tell you who the best candidate is? And how does character fit into the equation when you go into the ballot box and vote? Welcome to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm your host, Richard Nelson, and today we're going to talk about candidate considerations from a Christian perspective. We're also going to roll back the curtain on how CPC vets candidates and how we arrive at candidate endorsements. And joining me today is Mike Harmon, former state auditor and state legislator, and currently my colleague and director of state outreach for the Commonwealth Policy Center. Mike, welcome to the Commonwealth Matters.
Always glad to be here.
It's always good to have you here. And of course, we're fresh off of being at Fancy Farm.
Love Fancy Farm.
And I need to say, I want to talk out of school a little bit if I could. Of course, we all went as a staff, went to several pre-events. We went to 4 pre-events to be exact.
Right.
And then we finally went to the event, which you got to be on the stage. But here's what I must tell you. I saw Mike Harmon in his element. Now, Mike, I've known you for years. I've seen you give speeches. I could probably tell all your jokes. Wouldn't do them as good as you.
I'm sorry about that.
But you were in your element, connecting with people, catching up with people. I just saw there was a gleam in your eye.
Well, I love this. Of course, I was at Fancy Farm for, I guess 8 different times. But, I've run statewide 4 separate times, so I've had an opportunity to visit with people across the state. So,
well, it was good to see you there. And I know that you've enjoyed, of course, and people who've listened to this program know how much you enjoy serving in office.
Definitely.
And you enjoy the events. You enjoy being around people. You enjoy casting a vision. But I thought it'd be good for us to do a program on a Christian perspective of looking at candidates and how they arrive at who they're going to vote for, because you've been a person on the outside, just a regular person like all of us, never held office.
No, it's hard to believe, but yes.
But because you've done it for so long, 20-some years.
Right.
But we're going to start with this. Let's look at the issues. And I think that many of us as conservatives first look at what are the issues and where do the candidates stand on the issues. So here's the question. What are some of the issues that you prioritize as far as before when you're looking at candidates?
Well, of course, we talk about being conservatives, but different people define conservatism differently. Yeah. There's been multiple definitions, but for me personally, it's always been, I'm a social conservative. I'm both a social and a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social conservative first. So if someone is what they would call pro-choice, what I would call pro-abortion, well, that's pretty much takes them off the table, especially in a primary. If you've got everybody that's pro-abortion, then it gets tricky.
So the life issue, are you saying that's a primary issue?
It's my number one issue.
So I want to push back on that.
Sure.
Often I hear, and by the way, you and I are in the same boat.
Yes.
The sanctity of life is a priority issue. If somebody's not right on that issue, I question their judgment in other areas. But here's the pushback that I hear. I'm going to share it with you.
All right.
What do you say to those who say you're a one-issue voter? You're just a one issue, that's all you care about.
Well, I mean, there are some issues that, are foundational. And, when I used to go in and talk to school classes after I was elected, I would tell these kids, know what you're willing to compromise on, because there should be some things you've got a little give, but also know what you're not willing to compromise on. Yeah. If you know both of those, you can negotiate from a position of strength and do the same thing when it comes to picking the people that I'm going to vote for. I think we had talked about the example before, long before I started to run, a gentleman came by my house, saw my wife. I was at work. Yeah. He said he was a pastor and said he wanted to put his campaign side. I don't know what he was running for anymore, but said he wanted to put his campaign side. And I said, that's fine. Well, I'm sorry, my wife said, no, I've got to wait and call my husband. And so, but give me your number and I'll come. So anyway, so when I got home, she gave me his number. I called him and started asking questions. I said, well, where do you stand on the life issue? And he's like, well, I think that's between God and the doctor and, and everything else. And he was a pastor. And I was just like, well, I appreciate your time, but you can come get your sign. So,
yeah. So there are foundational issues that really should temper and really sway us to vote for or against somebody,
course.
really. A couple other issues that have been front and center are the gender ideology issues.
Oh, yeah.
All of the related, the boys in the girls' bathroom, boys who identify as girls on girls' sports teams, and then even teaching it in the schools.
Yeah.
Would that be right up there with the foundational?
It would be there, foundational as well. Of course, when I first started, we would never have had that conversation. We didn't have that conversation because it wasn't an issue. Right as I was getting ready to leave being auditor, probably a few years early, that's when we started to see all this that, sadly they were wanting kids to be mutilated, which is crazy.
Yeah. These are issues that we would have never imagined just a few years ago.
No.
And yet they are front and center. Would a candidate, and I'm thinking of a couple people in the legislature right now who voted the wrong way on a couple of these gender ideology bills. They've seen what's happened in primary elections, or they've had close general election challenges. And in one case, I've seen a person truly, I think, move in the right towards our position.
Right.
There's one who regrets their votes. I don't know if they've truly moved on it. But do you believe in redemption?
I do believe
when
in
it comes to
I'm a Christian, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I do.
So it's like,
I gave you a softball there.
I know,
But I'm wondering, can candidates truly, not just from a political calculation,
Sure.
but true conviction, move from one position to another, especially on a hot topic social issue?
I think if they're sincere, obviously we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of the God. We talk about redemption. And for some of the ones that I think you're talking about, maybe not all, but some of the ones, at least one specific one, I think there was a sincere move. I don't think it was just political. But, we do see that some. And it's important for us to be able to be fruit inspectors and try to find out whether or not that was a sincere move or it was a political move.
Yeah. Good answer. I agree with that. Are there any policy positions? We got just about a minute here until we take a break. Are there any positions that would rule out you voting for a candidate?
Well, I think the life issues is the number one.
Here's the follow-up, and I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I think that's important. What if you have two pro-abortion candidates on the ballot?
If are we talking about general or are we talking about primary?
Either one.
Either
Primary election.
Well,
Let's start with that.
If they're equally, then I have to assess, is there one or the other? Do I think I can eventually move them in the right direction and do the other items that they support? And maybe next time we need to do better at recruiting someone that has a pro-life position.
And we're going to talk a little bit about CPC's involvement with elections, the recruiting and the vetting and the questionnaire process as well. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Here at the Commonwealth Policy Center, we believe that every Kentuckian deserves a voice in Kentucky's capital, not just a special interest. But we don't have the deep pockets of the Kentucky lobby. That's why in America's 250th, we're asking 250 families to partner with us monthly at just $25. Your support ensures that you have a voice in Kentucky's capital. Please scan the QR code and join us in the fight for Kentucky's future, or visit our website at commonwealthpolicy.org and donate today.
Welcome back to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm your host, Richard Nelson, here with former state auditor and currently the state outreach director for Commonwealth Policy Center, Mike Harmon. Mike, we're talking about the upcoming midterm election. It's less than 90, or right about 90 days away. We're thinking through how to determine who you're going to vote for in an election, whether it's a primary or general. And we're doing it from a Christian perspective. We've already established that there are primary foundational issues that should temper how we think. The sanctity of life issue, that's foundational. If we don't get the sanctity of life right, then the other issues don't matter. The other rights really don't matter if you have not secured that foundational right to life. At CPC, religious freedom and conscience rights, that's a foundational issue.
Very foundational.
A marriage between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
God's design of the most basic unit of society, one man, one woman in a covenantal union for life. These are foundational issues. I want to move over to something that we saw this last election with the anti-incumbency trend.
Yes, very much so.
18 judge executives. These are the highest elected officials at the county level. 18 incumbents, many of them very powerful. Many served for several years, and many of them did good in their communities, but they were swept out of office.
A bit uncommon because usually the incumbency, you used to have a 95% chance of reelection.
That's right, and unless something was stirring. Now, what has contributed to that after reflecting and looking into these different areas and looking at the issues? A couple things. Solar farms played big into that. Land use, the preservation of ag land, AI data centers have played into it. And from what I've learned, in about 8 of those races, 8 out of the 18, data centers played a big role. Either the judge executive was tone deaf, or they didn't listen, or they were on the other side of that issue. And I think when the electorate, the voters, feel like they are not being heard, they're going to vote the incumbent out. They will vote for the person who they think is listening to them. But I want to go back to, is it a negative or a positive that somebody's in office? How would you view that? Because you've been on both sides.
I've been on both sides. I think obviously it depends on how you handle it. When I first got elected to the state house, people would call me or send messages or whatever, and I did my best to try to get back to everybody. And when I first started calling what they used to call the green slips, people would be like, why are you calling me? And that's like, well, you called, you left a message. I'm like, I know, but no one's ever called me back before. I was like, well, we're going to start something new. You know? And so
surprise some of your constituents that you're actually calling them.
And I think that helped me in, re-election efforts as well.
Can I just stop right there? Let's pause and talk about this. How much time did that take?
Oh, tons. Tons.
Because this is important, because many people don't realize how busy legislators are, from the committee meetings to the floor action to studying up on bills, and then you've got constituents who are calling in.
But it's also very important because I had one lady was complaining about a particular issue, and I knew who she was. She was or at least the person on the green slip was my wife's friend. So I called her, and she's like, I did not call. And so somebody had taken her name and her number on this particular issue and was trying to use it to move me in one or another direction. So
so not all of the calls that come in are legitimate.
So some of my first auditing long before I was auditing.
Well, that's interesting. But this anti-incumbent trend. Now, you first ran for the state house
in
1998, and it was against an incumbent, somebody who was there.
No, not really. When I first filed, there was an incumbent that had been there 28 years. He decided not to run.
Okay.
And so then it was an open seat.
You scared him off.
Yes.
So he didn't
I don't know if I did or not, but
often they don't want to, so in all seriousness,
yes.
though, often they don't want the possibility of losing.
Oh, yeah.
And 28 years is a long time.
Which would be hard to scare him, because in the area that I was running, it was only 25% registered Republican. Had a 3-way primary in the Democrat side, and then I ran against the gentleman, really the only Democrat that I've ever lost to. I lost to him twice. He's actually Republican now, but I did, as an incumbent in 2000, I did run against him a second time.
When you were first campaigning, Mike, let us, if you could, share with us what was in your mind as you're out there knocking on doors and making speeches, and that very first time.
I think my story. I filed a run. So that people would have an opportunity to choose. And real rough that first time that I ran. 3 months after I filed, my father passes. A few months later, there's one of the deputy sheriffs, Regina Nooks, gets gunned down at our factory.
Where you were working?
Where I was working. And had an opportunity, the night I was working, actually, and had an opportunity to meet with her mother. And it was a very humbling thing in that regard, where she had forgiven The parents of John Paul Works wanted forgiveness, and she said, well, there was no need for because they didn't do it. But she said, I even forgive John Paul Works. She said, I want him to go to jail. I don't want him to get the death penalty, but I want him to go to jail for life. But and here I am as a Christian thinking, would I be as forgiving if that had been, one of my daughters, or now, my grandchildren.
Yeah.
So it is, so there's a lot going on in your head during that time frame. So you talk about the issues, you listen to people, you knock on the doors. I had people crack the door and say, I can't be seen with you or I'll lose my job, but I'll be voting for you. Bye, boom, and shut the door. So it was kind of interesting.
Well, you learn a lot when you are on the ballot and you're trying to connect with voters, and you learn a lot about their lives, what's on their mind, and then the fear that they have. And
Yes.
to your point there, that in some of the Democratic strongholds or areas where there's a political machine, if you will.
But people want to be heard. That's the key. I mean, people want to be heard. They don't want to necessarily hear you give a speech. They want you to ask questions of what's important to them, and then they want you to actually respond to them and not just ignore them.
So you ran 3 times before you got elected.
Yes.
It was the third time
Third time I got elected.
that you got elected to the state house.
First Republican in 102 years from Boyle County.
That was quite a milestone.
Quite a milestone.
Then you ran for the state auditor position.
Well,
you
prior
ran for
to
governor. You ran for governor.
Lieutenant
before that
Governor,
with
Lieutenant Governor with Phil
Phil
Moffitt.
Moffitt.
We fell short on there. And then God laid on my heart to run for auditor. And
I want to take a look just for a minute here, and to help those tuned in to understand how hard, even in a Republican primary, some of the headwinds that you face from your own party and from other people. Tell us just for a minute, when you and Phil Moffitt decided to run kind of as, I don't want to say outsider candidates. Phil was a successful businessman, but you were in the legislature. You were elected.
Yes, but we were running against the sitting Senate Republican president. And we were also running against a very popular ag commissioner and former UK basketball player, Richie Farmer.
Yeah.
Now, there was also a third candidate, Bobby Holtzclaw, county clerk in Bill Vermillion. But Phil and I were, even more so than Bobby, were the red-headed stepchildren of the Republican Party during that time frame.
And that's a nice way of putting that you had a lot of abuse heaped on you.
Yes, very much so. Very
Threats.
much so.
Threats as well.
Some threats, some interesting things. Phil and I would show up to events, and David or Richie would be the keynote speakers, having 25 or 30 minutes. We might get 30 seconds, but that's okay. I mean, it wasn't okay back then, but it's one of those things you just learn to move on. And we actually got close, and actually I knew of some people in Steve Beshear's camp who said that they were sweating bullets the night of our primary, because they actually already had the numbers that if Phil and I could have cleared that primary, we would have beat Steve Beshear. But God has different plans, and we've got to follow God's plan.
That's right. And I appreciate how you have thought through that and how you accepted that. You chalked it up to learning experience. You continued to be gracious and careful as you campaigned. You didn't get bitter. And I'm going to talk out of school a little bit again. But I saw you sit down with David Williams at Fancy Farm. Yeah. Obviously, you buried the hatchet.
Even after the primary, I went out and helped him campaign after the primary, which is what you need to do, because I knew it would be difficult, and it was, because David is brilliant. I mean, he's a brilliant man, but especially back then, his negatives were way too high. Yeah.
He hit the nickname. Well, I'll just leave it at that. We won't
go
into that much further.
He's come a long way, as we all have. So.
Yeah. No, very good. All right. We're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about processing through the election and the candidates, and we're going to look behind the curtain of CPC's process, in particular, of how we come to our candidate endorsement. So stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment. Here at the Commonwealth Policy Center, we believe that every Kentuckian deserves a voice in Kentucky's capital. not just a special interest. But we don't have the deep pockets of the Kentucky lobby. That's why in America's 250th, we're asking 250 families to partner with us monthly at just $25. Your support ensures that you have a voice in Kentucky's capital. Please scan the QR code and join us in the fight for Kentucky's future, or visit our website at commonwealthpolicy.org and donate today.
Welcome back to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm your host, Richard Nelson, here with CPC's Director of State Outreach, Mike Harmon.
Am I supposed to be reaching out? Is that?
You could reach out. You're doing a good job right here connecting with those. There's a camera. Look right into it.
There we go.
But no, you are doing a great job. And we appreciate you.
I appreciate that.
We appreciate you being on our team. And of course, we're talking about processing through the election. It's a major midterm. Many people are focused on the congressional and the U.S. Senate races that are on the ballot across the country.
But especially in Kentucky.
In Kentucky. But at CPC, we focus on primarily state level, state House, state Senate, and then the executive branch, constitutional offices.
Right.
So we're going through processing through how we think as Christians, how to vote for the right person. And often, Mike, and I want to start with this, we have two very imperfect people on the ballot in many areas, and many Christians have a desire to see pro-life, pro-religious freedom, pro-family, fiscally conservative people that they could vote for. In many cases, they don't. And what's the hardest? Well, I don't want to put you on the spot that way. Let me think through.
No, I'll go after that one. The hardest time is just the same thing that you just said. There are going to be times, many times, that individuals, especially in the higher you get in the races, as you said, I don't remember a race where there was ever a perfect person, because none of us, and myself included, is not a perfect person. But sometimes you just have to weigh the pros and cons. Generally, obviously, if you're wanting to get the person closest to your beliefs, your philosophies, hopefully you do that in the primary. Yeah. Because once you get to the general, it's tough. I mean, there was a time that there was a little more similarities, but not anymore, for sure.
Looking behind the curtain here at CPC, I want to share with our audience, as part of our process is we have something called an agreement in principle document. It's a foundational document that tells us a lot about that candidate and what they believe in. And here's what it says. Our rights come from God, including the right to life, conscience, and religious freedom. Male and female identity is defined at conception by God, who is also the author of marriage between one man and one woman. From this union springs children, family, and the first economic union, the building block of society. Since God endows us with rights, it is a duty of government to protect such rights, institutions, and fiscal integrity so human beings can live out their calling. Mike, you have reached out to the candidates, many first-time candidates, some incumbents, and you have offered this agreement in principle to them. This, as an organization, this is part of what you're doing, state outreach. What kind of responses are you getting?
I think for the most part, you see on the Republican side, you see not all, but you see the majority of Republican candidates willing to sign it. You see, I've seen one or two or a handful of Democrats, but most Democrats were unwilling to sign it. So that's generally it. And but like I said, on both sides, you'll see at least a handful that do not.
This is the very first thing that candidates get is our agreement in principle document.
Yes.
Then secondly, they get a questionnaire.
Yes.
And we have close to 20 questions.
Right.
Mostly related to issues that were introduced or came up during the state legislative session, I should say. And ranging from life issues, school choice, SNAP benefits, a whole range of issues.
And this year's focus, federal school choice, obviously.
That's right.
With House Bill 1.
What kind of responses are you seeing from the candidates? Especially, let's just hone in on the open seats.
Right.
There's a handful of state Senate seats, more in the state House. What kind of response are you getting from those first-time candidates?
For the most part, pretty good. I tenacity is one of my elements. And
I saw your test scores.
you saw
I know
my
that's
test
true.
score, so you know tenacity.
Yeah.
So if I don't already have their cell phone, then a lot of times, I'll try to search them down either on Facebook or find some other to get hold of them. As long as we can get them the information, the majority of Republicans will respond. There's a handful, and then some of them, you just have to continue to press because they've got campaigns to run. They get caught up in it. And although we are very important, there are a lot of other important things to them as well. So sometimes they just need to have it. Some of the people that are very near and dear to us, sometimes it takes them a while to get it in as well because their schedule is full.
That's right. That's right. Part of our vetting process is actually getting the candidates into our office or through Zoom in cases where they can't travel to the Frankfurt office. They sometimes live in far west or far east Kentucky, but we actually have interviewed many, many candidates, and that really helps us to get an idea. What are their core convictions? What is motivating them to run? What would they do if they were elected? So these are some of the things that we do. So there's three things here. The agreement in principle, there's that candidate questionnaire, and then there's the vetting process.
Right.
And then we will go before the executive board and we will put the names out there for them to review. Here's what we think. Here's the candidates that are on the ballot in the general. Because we don't endorse in the primary. It's important to make clear.
But we do candidate comparisons, but we don't endorse. And that's just based on their terminology and their prior voting record if they had it.
That's right. That's right. And then we will make recommendations to the executive board. Here's the people on the general election ballot that we recommend. And sometimes, in some cases, there's a board member who says, hey, I know that person and there's some red flags here. So just because after we've done everything, we share it with the other board members at Commonwealth Policy Center, and then they make a decision. Mike, it has been really good to have you on the program here. We are out of time. Just want to remind those who are tuned in that Election Day is Tuesday, November the 3rd. Early voting begins Thursday, October the 29th. It goes into Friday the 30th, Saturday, October the 31st. Those are the early voting dates. And we encourage you all to, if you're not receiving Commonwealth Policy Center's email updates, go ahead and sign up on our website, commonwealthpolicycenter.org, and you will stay in the loop with the candidates and with our endorsements and our voter guides as well. Mike Harmon, thank you so much for joining us.